I think that should be at least a good amount to get started. So I'll go ahead and I'll kick us off. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this webinar today that is presented by the medical cannabis community and INLabs. My name is Abraham Villegas. I'm the founder and operator of the medical cannabis community. It is a media-based organization where we focus on raising awareness, creating hyper-targeted online communities for the interests of our audiences, and facilitating market research initiatives to better understand the people that we serve. We believe in minority inclusion, diversity, empowerment, social equity, and all of the things that involve bringing more awareness and education to people who have not previously been able to take advantage of the benefits that cannabis and the industry have to offer. We partnered with INLabs to bring this webinar to you for your entertainment and education. And with that, I will ultimately pass this off to Star Cunningham, the Vice President of Innovations at INLabs. Thank you so much, Star. It's off to you.
Thank you so much, Abraham, for that great introduction. As he mentioned, I am the Vice President of Innovation here at INLabs. And what we do at INLabs is we're developing a network of diverse individuals who are going to be working together to create generational wealth for their families and address social and criminal justice inequities in an effort to better society as a whole. We know that the cannabis industry traditionally has not done a great job with the things that I just mentioned. Therefore, we have taken on ownership to drive innovation through access and collaboration. We have an awesome agenda for you today with some very good speakers who are going to address a number of topics. I also have with me, as part of INLabs, Mark Peysakhovich. Mark is the INLabs president, and he's a lobbyist and an ally and a strong proponent of social equity and generational wealth in the cannabis space. So individuals are here who want to make certain that you are successful in your quest to be a key player and someone who adds to and benefits from this space of cannabis. With me today, I have 4 panelists. We're going to start their introductions with Kelly Cassidy. Please, Kelly.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I am Kelly Cassidy. I'm the state representative of the 14th district, mostly located in the city of Chicago. I've got the neighborhoods of Rogers Park, Edgewater, Andersonville, and a little bit of South Evanston. And I'm looking forward to a great discussion. Thanks all.
Thank you, Kelly. Melvin.
Good morning. My name is Melvin Cox. I'm a commercial real estate broker with Howard Ecker & Company. I'm a tenant representation broker, so I focus on representing tenants when they're going through a lease negotiation or acquisition process. Never represent landlords, strictly represent business owners and tenants in their real estate needs. So looking forward to the conversation today and anything that I can add, as I have been specializing in working with cannabis companies so they can identify their real estate needs and secure leasing and acquisitions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Melvin. Chris?
Thanks for having me, Star. I'm Chris Stone. I am, I would say, a lobbyist / consultant as well. I'm also in the cannabis industry, but I'm an operator and owner, part owner in a grow facility in Barry, Illinois, as well as 4 stores located in Collinsville, Fairview Heights, and 2 in Springfield. And looking to continue to obviously be a part of the cannabis industry and grow the cannabis industry through INLabs.
Thank you so much, Chris. And Michael.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Clayton. I am an entrepreneur / real estate investor, and I'm looking to be a major player in the cannabis industry.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michael. Now, just a couple of housekeeping items for individuals who aren't extremely familiar with Zoom. Ensure that you open up the participants window. There you should find your name and be able to raise your hand and ask a question. There's also a Q&A button along the bottom of your screen that you would be able to access and ensure that any questions that you have that we do not go over, you're able to answer. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark to kick us off. Mark, please.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Star. I did want to mention a couple of things before we get going. One is I'm very proud of INLabs and Can Capital, which we founded with some of the partners who are online here. And I wanted to point out that by design, it's a majority minority board. So I am a minority on the board of directors of Can Capital Partners, which operates INLabs, and that is a point of pride for me. I also just wanted to mention that Star, who is my fellow moderator, is a star. She is somebody who has been recognized nationally and has been covered media nationally for being one of a very small handful of African-American women tech founders to have raised significant investment. And so it is a real benefit to have her today, but it's also a real benefit to have her as a part of INLabs. And just without further ado, to get us started, I think one of the things that everybody is wondering about, and that I've gotten a lot of questions about, and I'm sure everyone else has too, is about real estate. So it will probably be, maybe we'll start with Melvin, but I know Michael and Chris are also dealing with these issues. So, you know, I had a contingency agreement in place, and I wanted to locate my business there. The agreement's due to expire because of the delays. And what do I do now? How does that work? What do I need to be worried about, Michael? How do I talk to the people I'm dealing with, et cetera?
Well, perfect. Well, I'll take, or we want to go ahead and jump right in?
Please.
Good with that. Perfect. So I'll take that. So first and foremost, the number one question would be, when you signed that agreement, did you have a broker representing you, or did you sign it directly with the landlord and you may have been dealing with the landlord's broker? That's one point. So let's talk about a case where you don't have a broker. So a lot of times people don't use a tenant representation broker. They go directly with the landlord's broker or whatnot. In that case, read the lease agreement, see if you have a termination clause. If there's a fee for terminating the lease, if there's not a fee for terminating the lease. And your contingency, how was it drafted? If it were drafted contingent upon you obtaining licensing, that's one piece. So then this is a simple conversation of getting extended. One thing that I can assure you is that every landlord in this current market, they're looking for tenants and they don't know what's going on. They would like to have you as a tenant because they're coming few far in between nowadays. Definitely having that conversation, keeping communication open is going to be a big first step. So to answer directly, if you have a tenant rep involved in that deal, your tenant rep should be able to get you an extension with no problem. One big benefit of having a tenant rep is that all landlords know that a tenant rep will move their tenant and find another space for them. And they have that in the back of their mind. And so they're going to be very willing to address and work with the tenant rep to figure out what exactly is going on, what they can do to get it worked out. And let's face it, everyone knows that we're all being delayed and no one's really moving at the pace that they were moving originally. So they understand that the licenses have been delayed. It's just keeping that communication open and having the conversation.
Melvin, just a real quick follow-up on that. A lot of times when people find out it's a cannabis tenant, it's sort of a captive audience, and they may not have the same options to move as another kind of non-regulated business. And a lot of times when people find out, oh, you want to open a pot business here, they're going to jack up your price. How does that work within this context?
Be upfront with it. So first of all, eliminate the surprises. So the first thing coming in the door is that we wish to operate a cannabis business here in this space, whether it be a dispensary or craft grow, and let that comment lead the rest of the conversation. On the flip side of that, once that has been disclosed, then you're specifically looking for real estate that's going to allow for that business to be operated in, whether it be you're 500 feet from a school or whether it's 1,500 feet from another dispensary. Then your broker and yourself, you guys can start looking for those spaces in that point. Now, as far as for paying a premium, you are going to pay a premium. Most landlords are, I'd say, anywhere from 25 to 100% of a premium just to operate a cannabis business. Everyone's speculating on the money that's going to be generated in this business, and therefore the landlords are stating that they would like to receive additional money as well. So that is just a nature of the beast. But at the same time, when you have options to locate, that's some negotiating power in itself, because there are going to be few licenses that are issued, and landlords, they want to make sure they get a tenant.
Hey, I may also, this is Chris Stone. I may add that, you know, when we're talking about options and extensions, that you might want to be thinking about at least a 6-month extension, and not just do 1 month or 2 months or 3 months, because we just don't know what the selection process is going to be for both dispensaries and craft grows at this point. So I'd at least advise for a minimum 6-month extension.
Michael, is this something you've had to deal with?
Yes, honestly, I locked in myself in an LOI, and it expires, I think, the end of July. So I will have to talk to the owner and lock in another LOI. So yes, honestly, I am experiencing that right now. But I'm glad it was just a LOI and I actually locked myself into something that's permanent, you know, like some people might have done, you know. So yes, I am experiencing that.
Okay. Representative Cassidy, are you hearing anything about real estate?
A bit, not a ton. It's more sort of the entire package, and real estate is just the thing that's currently most pressing because of folks who are in situations like Michael's. But we are getting calls regularly, hoping that, you know, my tea leaves give somebody the answer of when it really will be released, and we don't know yet. Because folks who are in situations like Michael's, or as he put it, you know, folks who did even more than an LOI, you know, that's money out of pocket every day, every week, or every month, that we delay. So that we are hearing from folks in that circumstance, trying to get a sense of, you know, whether they've started trying to renegotiate with the property owners, and the property owners want to know, well, how long are we talking about here? They don't, you know, they're worried about, you know, an indefinite waiting period as well. And that just, you know, trickles from there with every potential vendor that you're going to be dealing with. So yes, we are hearing from folks who are getting, having some anxiety about what the delays mean for their business model.
And Representative Cassidy, just to sort of reiterate what you just said, we want to take all the pressure off of you. Just to confirm, you're reading the tea leaves just like the rest of us, just because you were sort of one of the people who birthed Illinois' current cannabis system and program. That does not entitle you to any particular insider knowledge about what's going on with the licenses. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do not have any inside track on that. You know, a lot of times, and yes, birthing is a great way to describe how this bill came to be. That's what it felt like. And I think at one point I joked when we released the final language, I feel like I've been pregnant in public for 2 years and everybody's going to say my baby's ugly. So we'll just continue with the birthing analogy. This would be the equivalent of, you know, when your kid turns 18 and moves, you don't know what they eat for breakfast, right? Like, I've lost control of my 19-year-old's day-to-day activities, and it's much the same with this, where we just don't, I don't have the inside track. I don't have the absolute information on what date it's going to be, they're going to be released.
And I know we have questions coming in online. Star, I'm turning it over to you.
Absolutely, we do. This is directed to Melvin. What typically are tenant rep fees?
Tenant rep fees, generally we get paid a commission. It's anywhere from 50 cents to $1.25 a square foot that's paid by the landlord. So if and this is in a lease situation, okay? The landlord has set aside funds to pay out a commission, and if you choose not to use a tenant rep, then those commission dollars either stay with the landlord or they get turned over to the other broker that's representing the landlord. But generally 50 cents to $1.25 per square foot per year of the deal as well, just in full transparency there. And then I want to dovetail back real quick to Michael's part. The LOI stands for letter of intent. If that letter of intent were to expire, that should not have a monetary implication, which maybe it could be beneficial to you. I wouldn't so much stress about the LOI expiring, but I definitely would still have that conversation, keep communication open with the landlord.
Thank you, Melvin, and thank you for the question, Deborah. Back to you, Mark, to move through real estate. We're at the 18-minute mark.
Is there anything else really on real estate? Chris Stone, you are a real estate investor and a landlord in addition to being an insider in the cannabis industry. Any other thoughts or considerations in terms of cannabis and real estate and the delay?
The other comment that I would make is it's never too soon to start working on the zoning side of this, because there are timelines by which you have to hit once you get awarded the license, and you don't want to just wait for that. You want to at least try to start going through the zoning process, whatever community you're in. Some may take longer than others, but at the same time, you want to at least look to start doing that in advance of getting the license. That way you're not putting yourself in a bad position to not hit your timeline per the state's mandates.
Okay, thank you. Another common issue I think all of us are seeing across the board is I thought I had great investors. We filed the application with all the uncertainty and the stock market and everything else. My investors are getting cold feet. All of a sudden, I might need to change investors after the application's already been filed. So in terms of the perspective of talking to your investors at this time, which I think Melvin or Michael and Chris, I would love to see you tackle. And then also, Chris, for you, what does it mean in terms of the application if I do have to change my investors? Do I have to, who do I have to inform?
All right, so I'll start that. If you do change your investors in midstream before the award, I believe that's called a material change, and the state requires you to submit that material change to them as soon as possible. So that's the first one. If you're going to change your investor pool, you can do it in a number of different ways. I would suggest maybe looking at, yes, you can change out one investor for the other, but yes, you're going to have to make that material change notice to the state. You can also do it as a convertible debt instrument, where upon licensing, that I'm going to call it that debt actually turns into equity, but you're still going to have to notify the state of that as well once you do it. And then there's going to be the period after award for the dispensaries that you can do that as long as you notify the state. When it comes to the craft grow has a provision in there that doesn't allow for the change of ownership until January 1 of 2022. So you're going to have to come up with maybe a few, maybe more creative ways to be able to do it if you're going to make the changes. But keep in mind that any creative change or change that you make, it's going to have to be within the purview of the statute and the rules that were created for craft grows, as well as notifying the Department of Ag of that change.
And Chris, when you say material change, let the state know, I don't want to assume everybody knows exactly what that means. Like, do you actually send an email, and to whom, or a registered letter, or how would that material change notification to the state actually work?
So the way that we've done in the past with the medical is we actually provide a cover sheet of what we're doing. Any type of plans that we have made changes to, or any type of document changes that we've made to the original operating agreement, any of the items that would make, that deal with the ownership structure, table of organization, we would include that as well. And then we would also take the application itself and we would redo the application with that owner's information. And then we would send that all in a packet to the state, most likely right now electronically, but we would tend to tell you that don't send it just electronically, also send it paper-wise. And when you're sending it paper-wise, make sure that you do it through certified mail. That way that the state received it.
And we have 2 follow-up questions from the webinar chat, and then we'll need to move on to business and finance. One of those questions is pivoted back to you, Melvin, a follow-up from Deborah. Does the tenant rep assist with zoning issues? And if so, how?
Short answer, no. We do not assist with zoning issues. That's the short answer. But we're going to leave that to an attorney. But based off of what the zoning issues are, we can help you talk through it. But technically, you want to deal with your attorney on that.
And lobbyist.
Fair enough. And then
This is not a do-it-yourself process.
It is not.
Zoning laws are too complex. Do not try to do it yourself.
Good point, Kelly. Thank you for bringing that in. And then another follow-on question is coming in from Christine. What do you recommend to groups who may have already lost their property after submitting their applications?
Give me a call.
All right.
We find you another space. I mean, I'm just being honest. We'll find you another space.
There you go. Thank you very much. I'll flip it back over to Mark, and we would need to move on to business and finance.
I do, and this is business and finance. In terms of investment, though, Michael, Clayton, you are an investor and an entrepreneur. What's your your personal situation, and what do you see others around you, particularly other applicants that you might know, dealing with in terms of losing investment or needing to talk to their investors, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's stressful. Honestly, I mean, everything is up in the air right now, and you're putting up a lot of cash on the upfront, and you know, you're worried. I mean, I'm married, so I mean, I'm talking over my wife and putting up all these different finances, and you know, me not being actually a social equity applicant, you know, I have to do certain things, and I have to pay people and pay people on payroll, and it's a lot of money coming out. And I have other businesses as well, and people are coming to me with other business adventures, and honestly, I'm kind of scared, you know, to even put out more money, and I don't know what's going on right now. It's a limbo, you know? So, I mean, honestly, I think everybody is having cold feet, everybody is stressed, and everything's in limbo. You know, no one knows what's going to happen right now. You know, like Chris said, it could be 6 months. We don't know. You know, so honestly, I mean, you just got to think smart. You know, you got to make sure you count every penny right now, and it's going to a good thing, you know?
Chris, Stone and others, and maybe we'll actually start with Representative Cassidy. There are a lot of social equity applicants whose applications are based on having 10 full-time employees and having at least 51% or 6 of those employees be from designated areas. And you know, people were planning on keeping them on the payroll for, you know, a certain amount of time. Now there are a lot of questions. Well, can I lay them off? Do I have to keep them on? What do I have to tell the department if I do lay them off or furlough them? After all, other businesses are doing it. So from, I guess from a political perspective, when you were writing the law and what would you say, Representative Cassidy, in terms of, you know, do you expect people to keep paying everybody indefinitely that they have on payroll? Or do you think it is acceptable, at least politically, to perhaps furlough employees if there's not a timeline for a decision?
And unfortunately, this gets us right back to my previous answer. I cannot speak to how the evaluators will interpret any individual action of an applicant. You know, I can respond from the perspective of, you know, what does common sense seem to be? You know, if other companies are using furloughs and considering people to still be on payroll, should that still apply to cannabis applicants? But I can't say what the scoring system and what the evaluators would contemplate with regard to that. So it's definitely a challenging situation, and I don't know what the best advice is for folks in that regard.
Chris, sorry, please continue.
No, it's okay. Go ahead, Chris.
Chris Stone, what are you advising people you've been working with in that situation to do?
Currently, we're advising them to keep the employees employed, but we also have a few that are considering furloughing. I think the interesting thing is that if they do furlough, especially on the dispensary side, they actually qualify for the additional payment, I believe, because they're not actually in business, in the cannabis business as of yet. So they would qualify for the additional unemployment benefits that are available to them if they are furloughed. So they would actually get paid more money if they were furloughed on an unemployment than they would as just a working employee. So I don't know the exact answer. We're trying to obviously sift through it. We haven't gotten guidance from the state as to how to deal with this. So it's an interesting deal, and I may be speaking out of turn, but it's an interesting concept, right? To furlough the employee to be able to get them more money. They're not going to lose out anything if they are furloughed, but the company then doesn't have to obviously pay them off of their payroll and continue to absorb the cost when selection may not be made until the end of the year. And keep in mind, the selection was supposed to be made per statute by May 1st on the dispensary side. Obviously, a lot of things have changed between the middle of March and May 1st. So nobody's going to fault the state or regulators for pushing this off, especially under the circumstances. But at the same time, it's a real situation where people are paying out those employees and are incurring the cost because of the delay.
Michael Clayton, you're paying your employees. You continue to have them on the payroll. You alluded earlier.
Yes. I didn't furlough anyone. I'm still paying.
Okay. Star, back to you.
Yes, a couple of follow-up questions. Is Illinois giving investors tax incentive to invest in social equity applicants? And then I have a follow-up after that.
The short answer is no. There is not a specific tax break relative to investment in cannabis companies, whether they're social equity or not.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And the follow-up on that, can investors benefit from opportunity zones? And both of those questions come from Bruce Montgomery. Hi, Bruce. Thank you for joining us.
So opportunity zones are a federal creation, and all of the federal programs are explicitly prohibitive to cannabis. There's a lot of overlap between social equity areas, disproportionately impacted areas, and opportunity zones. But the opportunity zone component does not really come into play because of the federal prohibition.
Thank you, Kelly.
Chris Stone, is there anything that can be done to, manage that?
Well, one thing you can do is you can take advantage of the state programs like enterprise zones and tax increment financing. People might want to look also into a new program that the federal government and the state did enabling legislation on called the PACE program, which is the Property Assessment Clean Energy program, as to be able to, find ways to be able to provide either, some financing or some incentives to be able to reduce the costs. I would also say this is that, like Melvin said with the zoning side, I think it's hugely important for any entrepreneur that's wanting to get into the cannabis industry to make sure that you have an attorney that you trust to be able to talk through the issues, and hopefully that they are somewhat well versed in cannabis. And I would also tell you that the next biggest person that you may want to talk to in terms of the way that you structure your business and the way that you operate your business is going to be an accountant who has some knowledge of the cannabis industry, and especially the IRS code when it comes to the cannabis industry.
Melvin, any additional thoughts on ways to find various incentive programs, et cetera, that might help you with cash flow and might influence your location choice?
I don't have anything to add. I'd be just echoing what everyone else said. But the big thing, definitely in opportunity zones, is that cannabis space is not going to flow into the opportunity zone piece of it. Everyone's going to mirror the federal guidelines on that. But going with your locale, so your city governments and your county programs, that's going to be the way to go if you're looking for additional funding coming at that city and state level and county.
Yeah, locals have a lot of leeway to create any incentives that they want to sort of help steer business into the locations that they want them to be in. So we intentionally gave the locals a great deal of leeway there.
Hey, Mark, this is Stone. I may ask the question, has the state rolled out that loan program yet? For
The applications are live, yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I didn't know if they were or not.
But keep in mind, the loans are for once you get awarded your license.
Understood.
Representative Cassidy, do you want to just say a few more words about the loan program and maybe the R3 program and other kinds
Sure.
of, things financed by the taxes on cannabis that are helpful to people?
Sure. So in the creation of the law, we were as intentional as we could be about infusing efforts into, whether that's resources or, preferential licensing or whatever, into areas that have been most harmed by the war on drugs. One of those is the loan program. It's administered by the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Those applications have gone live. The link to get those applications is on the DCEO website. But again, keep in mind that that's once you've been awarded your license. So once those results come out, the folks that have been awarded will have access to, I believe, the total projected amount in the fund was going to be $30 million. I haven't checked lately to see how much revenue has come into it, but it's close to that. And so that would be a revolving loan fund for social equity applicants for the costs involved with getting your doors open, frankly. And then as those funds are repaid, they're available to more entrepreneurs. Similarly, we were very intentional about making sure that a portion of the tax revenue from the sales of cannabis, and we've been busting sales records month over month. So the revenue is coming in. And part of that goes into the R3 fund, which is a community-driven grant fund for those disproportionately impacted areas, the R3 zones, so that communities can determine what it is they need to recover from the harms of the war on drugs. That application process, those planning grants, the first round of funding, has gone live, and that link is also available. And that's in the Criminal Justice Information Authority website. So that folks can begin that process of becoming grant funded. Becoming a state grantee is not easy. There are a lot of transparency requirements and regulatory requirements around that go along with being a state grantee. So it's not for the faint of heart. It's helpful for community organizations to perhaps sometimes do so in partnership with a larger organization that has the infrastructure to manage heavily regulated grants, but all of that information is available on the Criminal Justice Information Authority website as well.
And Kelly, Chris, Mark, this may be a good one for you guys to quickly address. In terms of the applications, once is there anything that the community can do to help the state move forward with the applications?
So, I think there's never any harm in people weighing in and pushing for more information and more clarity. And I do know that there's a great deal of empathy for folks who are sort of treading water and figuring out, the what now as we wait. The reality is, in every department, folks have been redeployed to COVID response. And so, we know that that folks are trying hard to get back up to speed and get back to their regular responsibilities. But if you think about it, so the dispensary applications are being reviewed by the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. That department was particularly hard hit by COVID, possibly second only to the Department of Employment Security. Because we did so many things in our COVID response relative to licensed professions. We were going out of our way to make sure that anybody who had ever held a medical license could get relicensed to be able to be deployed to fight the virus, folks from out of state. So my theory, and again, because I don't have that inside path, my theory is that a lot of the folks that would have been on the application review side of things were redeployed to do that licensing work. And so hopefully now folks are getting back to it. I am hearing from applicants who are getting deficiency notices, and I find that encouraging, because that means that folks are back to reviewing applications and making those determinations. We anticipate, because of the volume of applications, there will be a lot of ties, and that's where we get into the challenges of figuring out what the tiebreaker is going to look like. We weren't able to pass a bill in the fall or the spring or whatever season it was when we were down there for 4 days. We had a cannabis bill that would have included an explicit tiebreaker provision. We weren't able to pass it, so the administration has now filed it as a rule. That takes a little time to process. So that's part of the clue of when we'll be able to get some answers. But the reality is they're still processing applications, because I'm still hearing from people who are getting deficiency notices about their applications with an opportunity to repair those errors.
And of course, we're all reading tea leaves, but that's why a lot of there was a lot of talk over the last couple of weeks about sort of a mid-July announcements for dispensaries potentially, you know, I have no reason to doubt that, other than we know that the applications haven't really been all scored yet because of the deficiency notices and the timeline. And so, you know, take that timeline possibility with a grain of salt.
And I heard that one a lot as well. It's perhaps not unrealistic, but as you put it, Mark, you know, if we're still hearing from folks who are getting deficiency notices, that might suggest that that could be ambitious.
Star, back to you.
The only other question I have takes us back to the conditional license. What is the process like to receive final approval after being issued a conditional license?
Chris, you want to start that?
I'll start it, but understand that this may change depending on the department that you're dealing with and how they're implementing their programs. You are awarded a license, but you don't actually physically get your license until the department fully reviews your location, make sure that it meets all the specs that you put into your application and that you sent to the department before and after build out, meets all the security requirements that were in your application or that were part of your modified application after the award. So, you know, it generally, at least in our situation, we were awarded a license, but we didn't actually get the license physically to us until about 2 weeks before we opened up. And that process was about a 7-month process. Now, I think that they'll probably streamline that. But at the same time, don't expect that once you're awarded that you automatically get the license. There is a review process between the time of award and the time that you get your, I'll call it okay to open up, that you'll get your license closer to the time that you are okay to open up. And that could be upwards of 6 months.
And keep in mind that also includes local government and, you know, revisiting your zoning, revisiting, you know, anything you might need to do to meet their requirements as well. You know, and on the dispensary side, you know, some of this, it might even take longer than Chris experienced, because when Chris applied, you had to secure your property and have legal possession of your property through the entire, before you could submit your application. That's one of the requirements we took away because we saw it as unduly burdensome on lesser you know, folks who didn't have the kind of financing that first group had. And so there was opportunity to, like, that wasn't an open question. Is your physical space appropriately located? Was not an open question with regard to the previous applicants. But because we didn't make them have that space when they applied, that we start from there once you get your conditional license.
Yeah, Representative Cassidy's absolutely right in the fact that, you know, when we did it originally, we had the zoning in place. Here, you're going to have to go through zoning, and that zoning process is going to be at minimum 2 months, but I would say more likely somewhere in the 3 to 6 month range, maybe even longer, depending on the municipality. But I would say most of them have, they call them, you know, conditional permitted use processes that you have to go through in order to be able to get your zoning before you can get your building permit, before you can then get your license.
And hopefully, depending on the jurisdiction, you know, a lot of these timelines will run concurrently. You know, Chris talked about 6 months for going from conditional approval to final approval. like, it doesn't mean it's 6 months for that and up to 6 months for zoning. Some of those are going to be concurrent. So don't feel like this is forever. For folks who might be doing the math and thinking, holy crap, now we're talking 18 more months. We might not be. It depends on your jurisdiction.
Michael and Melvin, anything to add on those thoughts?
Honestly, that's not my field, so honestly, I don't have anything to add.
All right. Back to Star.
Yes, I wanted to say that we are receiving and acknowledging all of the questions received. We do have a Q&A that will start at the top of the hour, but we'd like to get through a few more questions that we had that Mark will ask of the panel specifically. So Mark, I'll flip it back to you.
In terms of the zoning process, and this is one of the questions I think that everybody is encountering and dealing with differently. What stage of the process right now do they need to be at? As they are waiting, Michael, what's the status of your zoning as you're sort of waiting for the license announcement?
Well, I mean, we're still in the process of getting zoned. So honestly, it's in limbo right now. Again, we're still in the process of getting zoned. It's looking pretty good though, honestly. I have faith in my team. I think I picked a great team, you know, and it's looking pretty good.
Yeah, I'm going to add to Michael's, comment that with Michael's situation, because I'm working with him on his stuff. We started the zoning process maybe 75 days ago, maybe longer than that. And so we feel pretty good in the fact that we'll go through the ZBA because his locations are in Chicago, and at least be able to get the initial portion of it done. We'll still have to come back for the final portion once the award's made. But at the same time, those people that are just waiting to get licensed, there are things that you can be doing in the meantime to help your cause. And like Representative Cassidy said, work concurrently so that you don't have to kind of wait to do these items. And one of the big ones is going to be your zoning application and getting that, through if you're in Chicago, the ZBA, or through your zoning board, wherever, whatever municipality you're in, is working on that now to be able to get that done. And the other thing too is kind of organizing yourself so that you can work in parallel on a number of different things to get yourself organized to the point where you're saving yourself time.
So, one of the things that we've talked about or has been alluded to, but we haven't really talked about is COVID, the pandemic, the reason for the wait. And I think there are a lot of questions around how does the new normal, if you will, influence what I'm going to do in actually opening up my business if I get a license in the first round? And also, how does that change the future application process? What are the kinds of things that you think we might need to consider when we are applying for the second round? And again, what are the kinds of things we need to be considering setting up our dispensary or our craft grow? Are there more contingencies about, sick employees and those kinds of things? Will the physical setup be different? What are your thoughts on that? I guess we can start with Chris.
A couple things that we're dealing with right now is the fact that, and we don't have turnover so much as we have people that are calling in, and we want to be able to give them, and when I say calling in because they're sick, we want to make sure that we're giving people ample opportunity to, one, not get burned out, two, to be able to recover, and to three, making sure that we're not exposing our employees to, any type of what I consider to be COVID type situations. So we're dealing with that, which new dispensaries are going to have to deal with, and actually new craft grows and infusers are going to have to deal with as well. How do you, social distance inside your facility? How do you build the barriers in order to be able to do it properly? Because the pandemic gets a vaccine potentially, and I'll say in the next year, doesn't mean that you're not going to be wary of making sure that you're protecting your employees. Furthermore, it's also about protecting the patients. And I think one of the things that we talk about is one, lots of things have gone online. Lots of people are buying their product via app on their phone. And I think that if you're a new dispensary, you need to be thinking about maybe the situation of reducing your store platform in order to be able to look at doing more, I would say, more app-based sales, as well as potentially, depending on how the state views this, going down the road, is more curbside deliveries. But we've been talking about this kind of on the periphery for what, the last 2 years, maybe, Kelly, that it may give us an indication as to potentially home delivery, potentially in the next year or two, and that's going to also affect how you design your dispensary and how you're going to deliver your product to your customers.
Absolutely, I think Chris really hit a lot of it on the head. Where the good news in this industry is that it's by and large folks that with an entrepreneurial spirit who tend to be a little more nimble with regard to sort of bobbing and weaving and dealing with things that are getting thrown. But I think that again, folks are, as this next round of folks aren't going to be held in the same way. Like, folks were stuck with these tiny little waiting rooms, and the layout was mandated under the medical bill in a way that made it really difficult for some of these folks to be able to adapt their physical space to allow for social distancing. And a lot of these facilities are so small you couldn't possibly stay 6 feet apart if your life depended on it, and it kind of does, which is where the emergency rule on curbside and things like that came in. And so having that in mind as you're designing your space, being mindful of the ability to adapt and adjust and reconfigure your space to for frankly whatever comes next. Because right now we're in the middle of COVID. Is there going to be another? Is there going to be something else? I think the chances are pretty good that some crazy thing is going to happen at some point down the road that we're going to have to be able to adapt to as well. And so being mindful of that, looking at, as Chris said, how is this industry going to evolve? What's going to be different about the way we operate? Be prepared to contemplate home delivery. Does that mean that you want a second bay where your driver can pull in and be secure? Does that mean you want to pick a location that doesn't have a lot of street traffic, so curbside doesn't become a safety issue for your community? Things like that, are lessons, big takeaways from the COVID crisis that future operators can contemplate.
Melvin, what's the general context for real estate these days and COVID, and how you think it applies to? I would think it'd be good news overall, will give us more options, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, whether it's good news or bad news, we don't know, because with COVID, I mean, in our opinion, we're still trying to get a handle on what COVID really is and how we're all going to move forward in general. And when it comes to real estate, how do you use space? So first off, we need more space. If you're going to go 6 foot social distancing inside your space, so in that respect, if you're still going to have 50 people working in an office, you need more space. On the flip side of that, we're seeing more and more people that are working from home, and more organizations that are giving the green light for their employees to have that option to work at home. And it's also sounding in at least here in Chicago directly, a lot of people won't be going back to the office until 2021. That's just in general. So we don't know. You have one side of it where you're going to need twice as much space as you currently have. The other side of it, you're going to need a quarter of the space that you currently have. So what that's going to result in, who knows? On the other side to that, an individual you need to get on your team and engage is an architect who does interior design, okay? And not so much for the design of the bells and whistles, but just we call it a program. Now, a program would be where an architect designs an office layout for your specific business needs, not necessarily the space that you're currently in or the space that you're looking at. So an architect may say, you've got 20 employees. The copy machine is going to be here. You need a conference room. These people work together in a collaborative space. These individuals don't. So in general, you're going to need approximately X amount of square feet. Okay, with that program in hand, then you can take that program and apply it to the floor plate of building A, floor plate of building B, floor plate of building C. Based on those different floor plates, it may require that you need 10,000 square feet in this space, 15,000 square feet here, 7,500 square feet here. Everyone knows commercial real estate, you pay by the foot. So if you need 10,000 square feet in this space and you need 15 in there, that's a big difference. So I've kind of bounced around a little bit, but definitely on the earlier comments of what is space going to look like moving forward, I do know that there are some within the, like if you're a craft grow and you're also going to have a dispensary, only so much of your square feet, I think it's up to 3,000 square feet, not to exceed 20%, whichever is less, you're restricted in how you can operate your business. So there are several different things that kind of play into that when it comes to your space needs, and get an interior architect to work with, and definitely if you're dealing with the landlord directly, they're going to tell you how to use their space and they're going to assign an architect for their space. You may not be able to take that and make it portable to another space.
Michael Clayton, you already run businesses, right? You have businesses now where COVID is a reality and you're having to adjust. How does that inform your thinking about the cannabis industry setup and what kinds of things you're already thinking you're going to have to do that you may not have been thinking about, 4 months ago?
Well, just like you said, space-wise, everybody has to remain 6 feet apart and stuff like that. So looking at the build out now, we kind of set it up like that already. We're not 6 feet, but where it was going to be a nice space amongst each individual. And in my business now, we had to put up the walls and some people don't know that me and my wife own a nail salon, and it was a lot of safety parts in the business, and our clients were scared to come in and get their nails done. So we had to make sure it was safe. So when people walk in, we check the temperature, and we also, if the people don't have a mask, we supply them with masks. So we just want to make sure everybody's safe. And when you actually talk to your technician, you're talking through a glass. So, and a glass has a little opening where you can stick your hands in and get your nails done. So we just want to make sure everything is safe. And you feel warm and feel the environment, in the environment, you're feeling warm and you're feeling like, okay, you know what? I feel comfortable coming into this environment and establishment, feeling safe. And so that's what I want to do as far as the dispensary as well. I want to make sure everyone is feeling safe and they feel like they're coming to an environment where they're not coming out coughing.
That's a great point, Michael. Thank you very much to all of the panelists. We are at a 5-minute mark where we're going to jump into the Q&A. So I want individuals to know that if you have typed a question that has not been answered, we'll have the opportunity to do that. You will also have an opportunity to raise your hand and ask live questions of the panel. Mark, you want to go through any type of prep for the Q&A, and after that, we can jump right in.
Well, let me just ask one final question that I think in terms of delays is really critically important. And I think everybody might have a perspective on it, but I'm certainly interested to hear from Representative Cassidy. So we'll start with her, but there is some talk that, COVID delays are one thing, but especially with this lottery, which in some ways may in fact be counterproductive to social equity, there are likely to be lawsuits and further delays. Is that something that you are expecting also? Is the state preparing for that as far as you know? And then, after that, maybe Chris can take that on as well.
It certainly was something that was contemplated as we worked our way through the language, quite frankly, because in every single state, there has been litigation immediately after the awarding of the first licenses. It's as, the sun rises in the east and it sets in the west, and in every state where we've rolled out legalization, people who didn't get awarded a license turn to the courts to try to reverse that. So that is anticipated. I'll be surprised if there aren't some suits. Now, whether they drag on or anything, that, you know, that's what's left to you know, the folks with crystal balls to be able to answer. But I would be surprised if there isn't litigation after the licenses are awarded. That's just what we've seen happen in every state.
Chris, are you thinking if there is litigation, it'll pause the whole licensing process, or will it be sort of concurrent? What's your reading of the tea leaves?
I think the last time out it was concurrent. I think that there were some lawsuits. Illinois' rollout of the medical program, it was interesting. I believe this to be the case, that I don't think that there were any lawsuits on the dispensary side, but there were a bunch of lawsuits on the cultivation side. Yeah. And so for those cultivators that were in a lawsuit situation, they obviously couldn't you know, open up and start building their facility. I anticipate that there's going to be lawsuits in this. There's more licenses that are going to be issued. You know, there's a lot of different things that are going on here that were different from the original medical licenses that were awarded. But I also don't think that it's going to stall the program in its entirety. I think that those licenses where there's no issues will be able to, you know, get up and running the way that they need to. So you know, it's going to affect some, but I would say for the most part, it's not going to affect most.
Okay, thank you. So we are about to get to our Q&A section of the program, and shortly Abraham and Star will be opening it up. If you have a question, you can type it in, or you can raise your hand, use the raise your hand option to be unmuted for verbal questions. So with that, Abraham, are we ready to move towards that?
You're good to go. We've got a list of questions that we're floating to Star, where we'll answer any of the unmissed questions that we didn't cover. And then from there, if anybody raises their hand during that time, we'll unmute them so that they could go ahead and ask the panel directly.
And here we go with the first question that we had taken down. Has anyone heard of organizations who are opposing geographic areas from allowing cannabis licensed businesses to exist there, and what can be done about that?
So I'm assuming that's referencing some of the groups that have been going around to local units of local government, trying to support opt-out ordinances. That's my guess. You know, there are a couple of different ones that are engaged in that, and quite frankly, that what we can do about it is to make sure that it's clear who is and isn't from that community participating in the back and forth, making sure that we are responding in kind with folks who are actually constituents of that unit of local government, saying we do want these businesses in our community. Frankly, we are getting very close to the next round of municipal elections. And so there is a huge opportunity for folks in either in opt-out communities or communities that are still discussing opt-out to do some really smart organizing around this and around those upcoming elections, whether it's a question of if you're in a community that's opted out and you want the community to reverse it, that's your first step, is to look at who those no votes are and whether there is an opportunity to either change their mind in advance of those municipal elections, or to change the seat. And so that's a really good use of that local energy. And I think that what we saw in that first round of opt-outs was, you know, groups of churches who were busing people into communities who weren't from there. And, you know, the first couple cities that did it, you know, were sort of taken by surprise by that. But then we did see some better local organizing and local reaction to that as some other communities came up. So, you know, staying on top of those local organizing efforts is huge. And, you know, as we, again, like I said, you know, all of us who are elected are really, really aware of our next election, and none more so than folks that run in the hyper local districts, because it's super easy to flip one of those smaller elections with some smart organizing. So be mindful of that and get engaged at the local level.
Thank you, Kelly, for that thorough answer. We're going to go on to the next question. With emergency rules for craft cultivation set to expire, will the Department of Agriculture have to release some sort of update? Chris, maybe you?
Honestly, I'm not sure that I understand the question. I didn't realize that the rules were expiring.
I think it was 180 days after January the 1st. Someone typed that in. If the person wants to type a clarification, they can. It was from Allison.
So just in general, our emergency rules are time limited, so they do expire. So the things that the governor did around these licenses during the COVID crisis are expiring. And so those rules have to be refiled with JCAR, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, which is a quasi-legislative body that takes public comment and debates the specific operations. So like with our law, we put a lot of detail in, a lot more detail in than most laws usually do, because we wanted to leave as little to chance as we could. But there were still pieces that have to be played out. And a good example of what goes to rules, I'll go to the medical program. You know, the medical law didn't talk about the kinds of security cameras and how long you have to store the footage. That was decided by JCAR. So those sorts of things will appear in the JCAR register when they're filed by the department, which then gives public feedback opportunity before they're finalized. Yeah. So they should have filed new rules.
I don't think
anything to add.
Well, I was just going to say that the emergency craft grow rules that were filed, I don't think necessarily have a huge impact on the operations of a craft grow, nor do I think that they have a huge impact on the applications. I think they were just clarifications on a couple of items that need to be clarified. And if they expire, I think, you know, for sure Kelly's right that they would have to go into a general rulemaking process and have them come in permanently.
And I know that they did file some things recently, but I think it was more specific to the dispensary licenses. I don't stay as engaged with JCAR. It's not really my wheelhouse. There are folks who specialize in the rule process and the regulatory process, lobbyists specifically who are JCAR specialists. I'm looking at you guys. But you know, there were some recent filings, but I believe they were specific to the dispensaries.
Okay, thank you so much, Kelly. Abraham, do we have any hands raised, or should I continue?
You're good to continue.
Thank you. Will the state send acknowledgements or confirmation that they received applications for the second round of licenses?
What second round? I'm sorry, I don't know that I follow. I don't know that you get any acknowledgement. Did you guys get an acknowledgement when you submitted your applications for dispensaries or craft grows? I'm not sure how that works.
So you can get a confirmation that they received it, but you have to ask for the confirmation. They won't just automatically send it to you. So on all of the applications that we sent in for both craft grow and dispensaries, we asked for a confirmation from the company that is doing the scoring for the state. The state actually hired an outside firm to do the scoring. And so when we submitted our applications, we asked for confirmation that they received them. And they sent confirmation.
I see somebody clarify that there is no second round yet, because that's going to happen after the disparity study. You know, what we built into the timeline was that hard pause after these rounds of licenses. So the dispensaries, craft, transport, infuser, after those are up and running, there will be a disparity study to determine if in fact our social equity applicant process accomplished what we hope that it will in terms of bringing more diversity to the industry. Once we have that disparity study, there will be a new process defined and released, but that's not going to happen until sometime next year.
And just to, because I think it's important in terms of clarifications, we're talking about phases or rounds of applications. So we had a round, first we had a round of applications for 75 dispensary licenses. Subsequently, we had the first round of applications for 40 craft grows, 40 infuser licenses, and an unlimited number of transportation licenses. Those are the 2 rounds of applications that we're waiting for answers on right now. Subsequently, in the law that was passed, there is, after a disparity study, a second round of licenses to be applied for. There will be 110 licenses for dispensaries that will open up, and then additional licenses also for craft grows and infusion. I believe 60 each of those in the second round. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Now, by law, the second round of licenses, as it says in the law now, have to be handed out by December 21st, 2021. Working back from that date, my assumption is that applications would be due based on that timeline sometime next summer. And then the scoring would take place throughout the fall, and licenses would be announced by December. So that is sort of a very preliminary guesstimate of my own on the timing of the second phase of licenses, when the applications will be due, which we don't know, and when announcements have to be made, we do know. And of course, any changes, any subsequent changes, any COVID-related issues or anything like that will really have potential delays as well.
Thank you.
And keep in mind that all of this is subject to change, because we'll be back in session in the spring. We'll be talking about whether this worked. We'll be talking about what the disparity study looks like. We'll be talking about changes in the process and the timeline. So, really be aware that what's in the law now is subject to change, in particular, if in fact the social equity applicant process doesn't yield the results that we hope it does.
Good point. Thank you for the clarification, Kelly. These 2 questions should be quick, yes, no, number. Is the Department of Agriculture reviewing infusion and transportation license?
They should be.
Okay. Do we know the number of applications turned in?
Approximately, yes, but let's go back to the last question. Once again, the Department of Agriculture hired an outside firm to be able to grade all those applications that came in for transportation, craft grow, and infusers, just so you know. My understanding, the approximate number of total applications for all 3 of those classes was somewhere around 800, somewhere around 900 total. Split up into roughly half of them are craft grows, and then the other, I'll call it 75% were, or 60% were transport, and then the other 40% from the half were infusers. So if I'm doing, it's a longer, sorry about the longer answer, but I think approximately—
Star's trying so hard to shut us up.
I'm working on it. I said 1 or 2 yes and no, right? But
that's all right. I think there was 150 or so infusers, 250 or so transports, and 450 or so craft grows.
Follow-up segue, any updates on when the transportation licenses will be awarded?
No, at some point after the dispensary ones. I think given that the transport are unlimited, it's a little bit easier. Either your application was complete or it wasn't. So that one should be among the easiest. But I can't imagine those being done before the dispensaries come out.
Okay, thank you. If the craft grow has a lesser amount that now needs to be raised than we originally put in our application, should we reach out to the Department of Agriculture?
Again, I think it's really risky to give. I mean, this is essentially legal advice. The reality is nobody here can tell you how the department's going to react to changes in your application. And so that's something that I would look to the legal portion of your team for an answer on.
I think the other thing too, in addition to that, I think the departments are, understanding that, there likely will be modifications based on all the stuff that's gone on the last 3 months or so. that I think that they're probably going to be willing to, accept modifications after award.
And I just have an additional question on that. Do you think the recent departure of the administrator of the cannabis program at the Department of Agriculture will add to the delay of screening those applications and turning them around?
I hope not, because we're pretty far down the runway. But also, word is that we're going to get a cannabis control officer real soon. And so, there's going to be ongoing personnel changes involved. And so hopefully there is a continuity of operations plan for personnel in every department.
Okay, thank you. Joseph, if we don't hit on this, you need to put some clarifying information in. Anti-cannabis organizations such as SAM are placing organizers in certain areas to oppose cannabis groups in those areas. Anyone hearing anything about this?
I mean, I kind of feel like the answer is the same as when I talked about the local government stuff. They are, but it's local by local. And yes, it is SAM, it is the Family Institute, all of the usual suspects are involved in this. And most of the time they are parachuting in. This is astroturfing, not grassroots organizing. So, what I would suggest to everyone is don't worry about what the enemy is doing, just do it better yourself and more authentically and more locally.
I like that a lot. What is the process? What will the process be or timeline for on-site consumption businesses? Thank you, Kristen, for the question.
And Chris and I both love this topic because this was an area that we were really, really wedded to making sure we got in the law. Illinois has the toughest Indoor Clean Air Act in the country. And that's been a point of pride for Illinois. Which gets us into a trick bag here when it comes to trying to create a space for on-site consumption, working our way around that. But that's a local government question as well, making sure that the locals are finding the way to write the zoning laws. Springfield figured it out. We can get there. The clarification we put in place creates a limited opportunity. It's not exactly what we'd hoped for yet, and we'll get there. As I've said a million times, January 1, 2020 was the starting line, not the finish line. But getting to that place of being able to do it beyond just attached to a dispensary or within a tobacco business, because that's how it's limited right now, because it parallels the smoking lounges that exist currently under law that were carved out of the Indoor Clean Air Act. But finding a path to that, I think, is critically important, because it is one of the inequity issues that we have to make sure that we don't take our eye off of, because we've seen inequitable impact of enforcement provisions on public consumption on communities of color. And so making sure we solve for that is huge. And frankly, I want to find a way to solve for that doesn't involve me coming out of one of these lounges smelling like tobacco smoke, because I think that's gross. So I don't want to go into those. So, being sure that we find a way to create a cafe is a priority, but we got to figure out how to thread that needle. And it starts with that limited process that we've created.
Fair enough. Thank you. Chris, did you have something to add on that?
I was going to say that also, the COVID situation obviously has impacted this dramatically. So I think once we get through the COVID issues, I think that, lounges will start to work themselves out locally, and you'll start to see more of them.
Okay. With all of the increases recently of COVID cases, have there been any discussions on additional delays?
No.
Thank you.
Doesn't mean they won't happen, but not yet.
Thank you. This one I'm not sure I understand, so Wendy, clarify. How were most lawsuits set up? Do they try to make the case they should have gotten one, or do they point to an applicant who did and try to make the case that they should have gotten it instead?
It varies by jurisdiction, and it's all comes down to what the folks' attorney's legal strategy is. We've seen some that have been targeted at a single applicant that perhaps there were deficiencies in that application that weren't in yours, and so you can make that argument. and the results vary as well. You know, in some places it's put a hard stop on everything. In other places, people have gotten, you know, the court has mandated that additional licenses be granted, as they did in Florida. So it really varies. There's no single one size fits all answer to it.
Mm-hmm.
Put 10 lawyers in a room, you're going to get 12 different lawsuit theories.
Right, right. Any hands raised, Abraham, or I'm going to go back to a question.
You keep on going.
Outside of equity, what should social equity applicants watch out for to avoid losing control of their companies?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I think, you know, ensuring that any partnerships you enter into are actually fair. You know, make sure that you're getting your own legal review before you enter into any agreements. You know, look out for those, you know, I'm going to run your business for you and you'll still be the owner and I'll just take all your profits kind of agreements. Those happen. There's a lot of predatory activity out there. And quite frankly, I'm very, very worried about that as we move into this next round, because so many applicants are under distress at this point and are going to be vulnerable to some of those predatory folks who might want to just scoop up those licenses for pennies on the dollar. So make sure you have really, really good legal counsel. Don't be so desperate to get fresh equity in that you give away the store.
Good.
Yeah, I'd also add that obviously consult with your attorney, but make sure your operating agreement is ironclad. You know, those are the basis by which bad deals are done. Is if you don't have a good operating agreement, you just pulled a canned operating agreement off the internet, don't do that. You need to make sure that you have a good attorney who's working with you to draft a good operating agreement.
Thank you. Now this is back to you guys on the panel. What are questions that were not asked or raised during this forum that you think applicants should be exploring more or asking? I'm going to go around the horn on that one, and I'll give Kelly an opportunity to answer that first.
Wow. This is, I'm terrible at this when reporters do it too. What do you wish I'd asked you? You know, honestly, the reality is there are so many variables as we move through this that, you know, the questions are pretty endless. And I think that last question we had is probably the most pressing as we work towards the release of the licenses. You know, making sure that folks aren't putting themselves in a position where they're vulnerable to predators, and spending more time focusing on that and making sure that we as a state, and this is something I'm looking at already and talking to colleagues about, making sure that any tweaks that we do to the legislation are through that lens. What can we do to protect these new licensees from predatory activities? Because we have these delays and COVID have created just a much more desperate situation for many folks.
Thank you so much. Michael?
Just to piggyback what Kelly said, yeah, it makes sense. They need to, don't be stressed out and don't just go with a quick fix of if they're running out of money and someone said, oh, I can help you. You make sure you have a good operating agreement. You got to make sure that you have a good lawyer to go through everything detailed, just like I did. And you just got to make sure you're going with a clear head. You know, everybody's stressed right now. Everybody is losing money right now. And I know it's people right now, I call them the big companies, who are ready to pick up and take over everything. You know, just big companies is what I call them, you know.
Yep,
They're
pounce,
just waiting
yeah.
right now. They're waiting. You know, they can play, they have the money to play the long game.
Right.
The people that don't have. So just take your time, breathe, you know, and I believe in God. I don't know about, you know, what everybody else do, but, you know, I pray about things and I just go on with a clear mind, a clear head.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you so much for that aspect. Chris?
280E, the IRS tax code.
Yep.
Talk to your accountant. Make sure you do the research on it and make sure that your accountant knows exactly what to do in terms of 280E and how it's going to apply to your business. Most people, when they put their pro formas together, probably didn't anticipate the impact of 280E. They need to, because that is definitely the biggest factor in whether or not you're going to be profitable or not.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Chris. Melvin.
Two things. One, the term of the lease. So how long should you be getting into a new lease? Because they're all startups. These are all startups. So for a landlord writing a lease to a startup is a pretty risky thing for a landlord. Term-wise, the shorter the better, always. We feel that the best lease is a 1-year lease with 99 one-year options. But a short-term lease is ideally what you want to be looking at because you're starting a new business and you want to see what's actually going to be happening and what those cash flows are really going to look like and what that business operation is going to look like.
Thank you.
I'll leave it at that.
And Star, I think we have somebody with,
I want to add one quick thing before we move on, though. I do want to make sure that folks, especially folks with contacts in other states, because our senators are fine, but folks who have contacts, connections in other states, we need to pass the SAFE Act so that folks have access to capital and traditional banking. So, you know, that's something, Illinois has done everything we can legally do to protect access to banking, but this is a federal issue. The House has already passed it in the most recent COVID package. It's sitting in the Senate awaiting action. Like I said, Durbin and Duckworth are both good, but anybody with contacts in other states, particularly red states, get that message to those Republican senators that we have to move that bill.
Thank you, Kelly. Mark, you have something to add?
I just wanted to turn it over to Abraham. I think he has a question in queue.
Yes, I have those, yes. Unmute yourself, Abraham.
We've also got a question from Belicia Royster. I unmuted you, Belicia, so if you would like, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Great. Greetings to all the panelists. Abraham, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak today. Very useful information. I just wanted to piggyback on what was said about the predatory lending. That's a passion of mine, and that's obviously a common scenario within this industry throughout all the states that have overturned and legalized marijuana or cannabis, if you will. As a result of that, a few others, as well as myself, have started an organization by the name of SEEN, Social Equity Empowerment Network. And basically what that is a consortium of cannabis business working to make sure that we create a vibrant and equitable cannabis industry within Illinois, and making sure that it's a positive economic engine for our communities and our partners, and just trying to remove all the barriers. So I'd like to share the information for that so that it can be kind of a plug into organization, if you will, or a trade association for social equity applicants and future owners.
That's awesome, and I would love to learn more about your organization so that we can push people towards you when needed.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Is there a link to a website or contact information? If you have that, we'd be happy to share it in the follow-up information as well.
Absolutely. CannaEmpower.org, and I'll drop it in the chat. Thank you.
CannaEmpower.org, is that right?
.org. Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you.
Abraham, is there another hand?
We had a hand that was up and it went down. They dropped it into the comments, and so we could continue with our last questions before we wrap up.
Will do. We have about 4 minutes left. Will the disparity report be shared with the public?
Yes.
Thank you. What was the name of the company grading applications?
It's Deloitte, isn't it?
No, it's KPMG.
Oh, right. Sorry.
KPMG.
Okay.
Sorry, yes, my bad.
It's easy to mix them up. I think that I've covered all of the questions that were listed. There was a comment about a cannabis and agricultural attorney. We do not have any additional questions at this time. We have about 3 minutes. Mark, did you have anything else to add before it flips back to me for wrapping it up?
Nope. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I think that there are a lot of us engaged in different efforts to further the cause of social equity. I think that that's great. There are a lot of resources sloshing around in this industry. And I think the more people that are advocating for social equity and fairness and inclusion in this program, the better. And I hope a lot of us can organize in some way and work more closely together.
Thank you, Mark. I definitely want to take a moment to thank the panelists. You've seen them here since the beginning of the call, but they also went through extra effort to prep for the call to ensure that this went smoothly for everyone. So I want to thank all of you for the time that you took out to join us today. Thank you very much. And then I also want to just take my hats off to people who hung in here as we delivered information about how these communities that are disadvantaged take advantage of being part of the cannabis community in a successful way. So thank you all for coming. Thank you all for watching. We will be sending out information and links, as well as this entire event was recorded. So you can go back, review it, and watch it. And please continue to look for more events, partnerships with the cannabis community as INLab grows and expands to accomplish our goal that we all have in common to ensure that there's an equitable approach to individuals participating in the cannabis industry. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye now.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Talk to you soon.